It's a rainy day in Minneapolis. It's a good day to stay inside, practice social distancing, and make a frequently asked questions video. I get a lot of questions about the tools that I use when refinishing furniture, so in this video, I'll go through some of my most frequently used tools. I'll start with one of my newest tools, and this is a paint scraper. Has a carbide blade, and this has been really useful in scraping off finish, especially since I haven't been able to find a good chemical stripper lately. I used to use chemical strippers a lot, but now it's hard to find one that works well, so I've been doing more scraping, and this has worked really well for me. And I also use card scrapers, like this one, to remove the finish. And these are maybe a little harder to use than the paint scraper that I just showed. Kind of have to grip it just right and bend it a little bit. So sometimes it gets sore thumbs from this. But these are good if you want to be maybe a little more careful, or maybe some smaller detail work. Probably have more control over this than you do the big paint scraper. And these do need to be sharpened. And there are plenty of videos out there on YouTube on how to sharpen these. So I would suggest looking those up. And it's not that difficult, just take some practice. And then there's the handy utility knife blade. I usually have a bunch of these lying around, and these are useful for lots of things. And you can use these to scrape off the finish if the finish isn't too thick. But you won't take off as much, obviously, with one of these as you would with the paint scraper or even the card scraper. I end up using these a lot for all kinds of things. After the scraping tools, the next tool that I probably use the most is this Orbital Sander. It's a random orbit sander, and I've had it for years, and you'll see me use this a lot in my videos, but you really don't need one to refinish furniture. It's just mostly a time saver, but sometimes it's actually better to sand by hand. It's just less risky sometimes to sand by hand, especially if you're not used to using a power sander. You could easily sand through veneer. And especially if you're near the edge of a piece, it's really easy to go through the veneer on the edge. Or if it's a really narrow piece, I usually do that by hand because I just don't trust myself to not go through the veneer using the big power sander on that small surface. Next up is a chisel. And chisels are great to have around for all kinds of stuff. But I probably use them the most for trimming veneer if I do a veneer patch. Once it's glued on, and if there's any hanging over the edge, I can use a chisel to trim it up. Next up is this soldering iron, and these are normally used for soldering wires and electronics, that sort of thing. But I like to use them to steam out dents in wood. And you can also use a big iron like this, but I usually prefer to use the small soldering iron. It just gives me more accuracy. And the last one is oxalic acid. And I use this to remove stains from wood, usually black stains that are left from water that's sat on the wood. And this works really well to take out the stains. And I just usually take a small container and put some hot water in it, and then start adding the oxalic acid until it stops dissolving in the water. And then I just spread it on the piece and let it dry and clean it off. And sometimes you need to do a second application, but this usually works really well for removing black stains and sometimes other stains too. And those are my most frequently used tools. And as you can see, you don't really need a lot to refinish furniture. I do sometimes use a table saw and a miter saw and a router. But that's usually just if I need to recreate a piece. For instance, a piece of trim maybe, or something like that. Otherwise, I don't use those very much. Thanks for watching.